Thomas Bata was born on April 3rd, 1876, in the town of Zlin, Moravia, then the Austro-Hungarian Empire, today the Czech Republic. His family had a long history of shoemaking, spanning 8 generations and over 300 years. At the age of 10, Thomas Bata's mother died, and his father remarried. The young Thomas used to help his father, a venturesome shoemaker, who, when Thomas was 14, appointed him as the man in charge of all sales. Thomas loved all technology. He wanted to persuade his father to use new ideas in production, and also to modernize the production process. His father refused all these ideas, so Thomas decided to become independent, and he started his own business with his brother Antonin and sister Anna. With 800 Austrian gulden, around $320, inherited from his mother, they founded and registered the T&A Bata Shoe Company on August 24, 1894, in a rented house in Zlin. The company was a cottage industry, where Thomas Bata and his family planned production, cut the materials for the shoes, and then subcontracted the assembly to the various cobblers in the area. Once complete, the shoe was inventoried and Thomas Bata had to sell them. 1 year later, in 1895, Antonin left the company to join the army, and his sister Anna followed shortly afterwards to get married, going to work in Vienna. Thomas took over the company's leadership alone and found himself facing financial difficulties. He couldn't afford new leather hides, and he had no money to pay for the old ones. Thomas stares at the remaining leather, and in his despair he hits upon the most important principle of his life: always turn failure into advantage. As they couldn't afford leather, they would have to make shoes out of what was available: canvas. Canvas didn't cost much, and the rest of the leather could be used to make soles. This is how Bata devised one of the great successes of the new century: canvas shoes with leather soles. People started to call the shoes Batovka, and the success allowed him to build his first small factory. However, Thomas realized that building a factory without a fundamental restructuring of the shoemaking process would not get the results he required. He read a newspaper article about some machines being made in America. Therefore, in 1904, he took 3 workers and journeyed to Lynn, a shoemaking city outside Boston, in order to study and understand the American system of mass production. After 6 months, he returned to Zlin with a plan to completely change shoe manufacturing. He wanted to produce cheap shoes in large quantities for everyone. Therefore, Thomas Bata set up the factory to produce the Batovka, the leather and textile shoe for working people that was notable for its simplicity, style, lightweight, and affordable price. The Batovka was the first fabric shoe, and the first to be made with mechanized manufacturing techniques. After Antonin's death in 1908, Thomas brought 2 of his younger brothers, Jan and Boris, into the business. Initial export sales and the first ever sales agencies began in Germany in 1909, followed by the Balkans and the Middle East. Bata shoes were considered to be excellent quality and were available in more styles than had ever been offered before. In 1912, Thomas Bata married, but in 1913 he went to the USA again. A conveyor belt was implemented in Ford's factory that year. Thanks to the increased volume on the line, he started mass production. Before World War I, Bata's industry focused on the production of canvas shoes. After the beginning of the war, Thomas had to re-evaluate the production, and they had to switch to manufacturing a different kind of footwear. In 1914, the company had a significant development due to military orders that the company had received to make boots for the Austro-Hungarian army. From 1914 to 1918, the number of Bata's employees increased 10 times from the initial 50. The company opened its own stores in Slin, Prague, Vienna, and other towns. As the company prospered, so did the communities where it operated. Bata created stores and erected housing, schools, and hospitals. After the conclusion of World War I, the newly created country of Czechoslovakia had a huge economic slump. Currency devalued by 75%, demand for products dropped, production was cut back, and unemployment was at an all-time high. Consequently, Bata's stock was remaining on the shelves. Falling demand meant a fall in production, which resulted in a big cut in the number of employees. Bata's solution was to reduce the retail price of the brand shoes by 50%. The company's workers agreed to a temporary 40% reduction in wages. In turn, Bata provided food, clothing, and other necessities at half price. Bata also introduced one of the first profit-sharing initiatives. The company also kept costs down through technological innovation. In 1924, a conveyor belt assembly line system, modelled on the one used by Henry Ford, was introduced. Consumer response to the price drop was dramatic. While most competitors were forced to close because of the crisis in demand between 1923 and 1925, Bata was expanding as demand for the inexpensive shoes grew rapidly. The Bata Shoe Company increased production and hired more workers. Workers, Bata men, and their families had at their disposal all the necessary everyday life services, such as housing, shops, schools, and hospitals. Bata also began to build towns and factories outside of Czechoslovakia and to diversify into other industries. In 1923, the company boasted 112 branches. Then the entrepreneur created educational organizations such as the Bata School of Work and introduced the 5-day work week. By the 1930s, Bata was the dominant footwear manufacturer in Czechoslovakia. This success was highlighted by the opening of the Bata building on Wenceslas Square in 1929. At the age of 56, Thomas Bata died in a plane crash in 1932 near Slin Airport. Under bad weather conditions, the plane lost orientation in the fog and crashed into a factory chimney near the airport. After the death of Thomas Bata, control of the company was passed to his half-brother, Jan. Jan Bata, following the plans laid down by Thomas Bata before his death, expanded the company to more than 6 times its original size, throughout Czechoslovakia and the world. The period prior to World War II was the most successful in the corporation's history, and the company enlarged successfully and was able to spread out beyond the shoemaking industry. Between the 1920s and the 1940s, Bata installed factories in Europe, Asia, South America, and Africa, becoming the largest shoemaker in the world. These factories not only produced shoes, but were also designed to resemble Slin with the same attention to harmonious urban living. Slin too expanded with new housing developments in 1935 and the construction of building number 21, which at the time was one of the tallest buildings in Europe. By 1939, Bata ran 63 companies in various industries, but footwear remained their core business, with approximately 60 million pairs being sold per year in more than 30 countries. Thomas John Bata, son of Thomas Bata, was born in Slin in 1914 and began his career as an apprentice in his father's factory in 1929. In 1935, he went to England as Assistant General Manager of the British Bata Shoe Company. With Europe apparently heading toward war in 1938, it was decided that Thomas J. Bata should establish a North American operation. In 1939, just before the German army marched into Slin, Thomas J. Bata emigrated from Czechoslovakia to Canada. He established a company town southwest of Ottawa and called it Batawa, an amalgamation of Bata and Ottawa. Thereafter, Thomas J. Bata fought in the Canadian Army during World War II. Following the German occupation of Czechoslovakia, Jan Antonin was forced to flee, first moving to the US and then Brazil, where, in what seemed a company trademark, more towns with names like Bataipora, Bataiguaçu, and Bataiuba were established. The war's aftermath was devastating for the company. Many of its facilities had been destroyed, and many of those that survived had been nationalized. Czechoslovakia was fully seized by communist powers, and Bata enterprises in Eastern Europe were lost. Even the name of Slin was changed to Gottwaldus. In 1945, the decision was taken that Bata Development Ltd in England would become the service headquarters of the Bata Shoe Organization. On October 26, 1946, Thomas J. Bata married Sonia. Sonia Bata was born in Switzerland, where she studied architecture. From the beginning, Sonia shared her husband's determination to rebuild the organization. Now based in the West, Thomas J. Bata, along with many Czechoslovakian expatriates, began to rebuild the business. Rather than organizing it in a centralized manner, the company established a structure based on autonomous operations. The Bata Shoe Organization then expanded around the world. Between 1946 and 1960, 25 new factories were built and 1,700 company shops were opened. In 1962, the organization had production and sales activities in 79 countries. In 1964, Bata moved the headquarters of the organization to Toronto, Canada. In the 60s and 70s, the Bata white canvas sneaker represented between 60 and 80% of the shoe production in the countries where it operated. In the 1970s, the organization focused on the business opportunities presented by global brand development, and new international brands were developed. Bata Industrials and Turtle Device, Industrial Protective, Double Dummers, Children, North Star, Athleisure Casual, Power, Specialty Athletic. In 1979, the Bata family established the Bata Shoe Museum Foundation to operate an international center for footwear research and house a collection that was started by Sonia Bata in the 1940s. As she traveled the world on business with her husband, she gradually built up a collection of traditional footwear from the areas she was visiting. In May 1995, the current museum opened its doors to the public in its own newly constructed building. The museum is currently home to the world's largest and most comprehensive collection of shoes and footwear-related artifacts. In 1989, with the fall of communism, Thomas J. Bata was able to return to the country where the business was founded, and Bata was committed to establishing a business in the native country. In 1994, Thomas J. Bata retired at the age of 80, even though he remained active in its operations and carried business cards listing his title as Chief Shoe Salesman. His son, Thomas G. Bata, who had been serving as president since 1985, assumed the chairmanship, and in the 1990s he moved to Switzerland. On September 1st, 2008, Thomas J. Bata died in Toronto at the age of 93. In 2010, Bata moved the headquarters of the organization to Lausanne, Switzerland. Today, the company, with 3 cohesive business units, Bata Europe, Bata International and Bata Protected, serves over 1 million customers daily through its 5,000 stores and thousands of dealers in more than 70 countries.